How you doing? I'm Matt Finney, and this is the Bad News Network. Apollo 8 astronaut Bill Anders initiated a deorbit savage burn on the NASA space program by saying that sending people to Mars was basically ridiculous and that NASA couldn't get to the moon even if they wanted to. He said that essentially NASA's just turned into a jobs program where workers just pretend to be busy. Anders continued, citing that the space shuttle accomplished nothing except for an exciting launch. He then stated that he's not a very popular guy in the NASA community, and we at BNN can't help but wonder why. The US government partially shut down on Saturday due to Trump's demand for funding for the wall at the southern borders. Thus far, there's no sign of the shutdown lifting before the new year. Trump was quoted in saying, "I can tell you it's not going to reopen until we have a wall, a fence, whatever they like to call it, or call it whatever they want, but it's all the same thing. It's a barrier from people pouring into the country, from drugs to coyotes, bees, spiders, quicksand, Sasquatch, holidays with my in-laws, commitment, Coldplay, guys in their 20s who wear old-time derbies. What's that about?" Congress and the President will still be collecting their paychecks, however, per the Constitution, so don't you worry about whether or not they're going hungry during the shutdown. The latest session in Congress ended with Democrats and Republicans shouting at each other over funding the government but not the wall. It's great when the executive branch and the legislative branch work together in concert to fail, rather than the usual modus operandi of failing individually. Teamwork makes the dream work. Japan announced that it will begin hunting whales again after going forward with its controversial decision to pull out of the International Whaling Commission. This obviously sparked heavy controversy from environmental groups and others who condemned the short-sighted resumption of commercial whaling. Basically, the commercial whaling industry was whaling on the whale population so hard that they approached extinction. A governing body was created to curb and regulate whaling and preserve whale populations. Japan still whaled under the guise of research, and everybody kind of just let it slide. So now the kid wants more, and the IWC parents are like, no. And then the kid's like, you're not my parents anymore, and they're just gonna go do it anyways. The North Atlantic also has a rich history of whaling, which birthed literary greats like Moby Dick, and the internet video of the dude from Malden screeching, "It's a baby whale!" But check this out. There isn't gonna be any more whaling if you kill all the fucking whales! Tell you what, you really want to whale commercially? Fine. It's one-on-one, you only get a set of pool floaties and goggles, and we drop you in there with a pissed-off Shamu. You get what you want, we get an awesome internet fail video, win-win, motherfuckers. In news that should surprise absolutely no one, the New Year's presidential elections in Afghanistan have been postponed 3 months due to inclement weather. Many politicians have been unable to meet registration requirements due to harsh weather, which has made travel extremely difficult. Plus, at least 10 candidates were straight up murdered, and the police chief in Kandahar overseeing the polls was assassinated. So as bad as things may seem right now, please remember that our politicians still fight with words and not with murder.
Except for the Clintons.
Oh yeah, except for the Clintons. They will murder the out of you. In more Trump being Trump and people hating Trump news, the president talked with a 7-year-old before Christmas and asked her if she still believed in Santa Claus. The kid responded yes, to which Trump replied, "She's 7, so it's marginal." People on both sides of the aisle wasted little time in jumping on Trump for suggesting to a child that there may not be a Santa Claus. In all honesty, the kid's like 7. She probably doesn't know what marginal means. She probably doesn't even really care that she's talking to the president. At 7, she's probably more concerned with the happiness of not being in school at the moment, upping her sugar intake, and hoping that seated comfortably underneath that Christmas tree is that shiny new Red Ryder M4 Ghost gun with a .30 magazine clip and shiny new bump stock. The public went into a frenzy last week when the media headline was released that an 8-year-old migrant boy died in the custody of Border Patrol as he and his father were apprehended near the border of El Paso, Texas. According to sources, the boy had flu-like symptoms and a temperature, so he was taken to the local hospital where they diagnosed him and sent him away with antibiotics. Later, when the boy worsened and was thrown up, he was taken back to a second hospital in Alamogordo, New Mexico. Doctors were unable to determine what the cause of illness was, and the boy passed away from whatever his body was fighting. The media spin on all of this would have it look like that Border Patrol officers are trying to find cruel and unusual ways to murder immigrant kids. Having worked with a number of these guys, I can tell you that none of them are walking around trying to come up with sick and twisted ways to kill people. Oftentimes they're by themselves and can encounter armed threats with no other intention than killing them and getting access to the US. It wasn't so long ago that a Border Patrol officer had his head stoved in while on the job, and where was the blanket flood of outrage then? Bad people exist on both sides of the border. We are lucky enough to have good, brave men and women that will meet those threats with a set of ROEs and appropriate force. Dead children is always a tragedy, and I know everybody involved wishes that that little boy was alive today. Since then, Border Patrol has implemented secondary and tertiary mandatory checks on all children in their custody. It's an imperfect system that's currently dealing with people unwilling to follow its process. In world news, an eruption from the volcano Anak Krakatau caused a tsunami to hit the Indonesian coast. Hundreds have died and thousands have been displaced since the tsunami hit without warning. Since the early warning buoys haven't worked since 2012 because, when you live next to a volcano, early warning buoys is sort of low on the priority list. And finally, the world lost a great man on Thursday as Richard Overton, the oldest American World War II veteran and oldest man in America, died at the age of 112. Mr. Overton served with the 188th Aviation Engineer Battalion after joining the Army in 1942. 1. Eat ice cream every day, it'll make you happy. 2. Drink whiskey in your coffee, sometimes straight, but don't drink too much of it. 3. Smoke cigars, but blow the smoke out, never inhale. It's hard to argue that advice. So here's to you, Mr. Richard Overton. It was an honor to have lived in your time. Fair winds, sir. And with that, I'm Matt Finney, and this is the Bad News Network. Our news is at least as bad as the news you're getting. Happy New Year, everybody.